Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree. I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Well, in the mid-1930s, a jawbone was found in a cave in China. And an anthropologist looked at that and he says, this is a jawbone of an ape, a gorilla, but very large. And because of the way the jaw was spread, he said it also sets on a spine, meaning it walked upright. It wasn't a quadruped. They estimated that it probably would have been around 8 to 10 feet tall. They had teeth. Had some of the teeth still in the lower jawbone. They found teeth over in China in the shops. They were grinding them up, these fossilized teeth, using them for medicine. Very interesting, because our continent was connected with China at one time. That was the only one at the time. Since then, 4 more jawbones have been found between Vietnam, India, and China. So these things were spread out over a long distance. And the first one, I think they dated back 500,000 years, must have went extinct 500,000 years ago. The next one was like 300,000 and 200,000 and down to 100,000. Every time they find a newer one, okay, it went extinct then. John Green once said, you should, of all the things people describe, they have an amazing similarity in their description of what they're seeing, what they could make up and what they're seeing. And they describe this upright, large, bipedal ape. So now we don't have to make up a creature to fit it. We had one that we thought was extinct. Hair samples have been found, they've been turned in, they call them an unclassified primate. They don't really have anything to match them to. Well, about a year or so ago, DNA has finally gotten to the point they've been able to extract DNA from a fossil. Now, because we have hair samples that have been called unknown primates, there's no classification to put them to. I am hoping they will be able to get some of these teeth, because now over 4,000 teeth since the early finding of the first jawbone have been collected. And I'm hoping that one of them will be early enough to our time that they'll be able to get DNA from it. If they do, and they could match that to the hair samples of this unknown primate, then science will tell us exactly what a Sasquatch was. They didn't go extinct. This is what people have been saying for years. On the A&E Bigfoot special, they mentioned that not even 1,000 years ago, when the first Norsemen landed on the East Coast, they were writing about these hair-covered creatures that would come out at night, because they called it doing their work mostly at night. We're stealing salmon from the net. You could always tell when they're around. They had to smell. They're describing a Sasquatch. And the natives along the shoreline who can't even speak their English their language at the same time, in their folklore, they're writing about the same creature. I find that interesting that not 1,000 years ago, 2 civilizations in the same area are talking about something that could very well fit the Sasquatch, this hairy, upright, man-like creature. And I find that very compelling.
So you believe it's a creature that hasn't actually gone extinct, coexisting with humanity throughout our history, probably even older than humanity.
Yeah, that's right, because so many descriptions where people have seen them in their headlights. Even police officers in their spotlights have claimed to have seen them at night on patrols. They claim they have this eye glow, this eye shine. I asked the late Grover Krantz, anthropologist from Washington. I asked the current anthropologist from Idaho State University, Jeff Meldrum, has man ever had nocturnal capabilities? Would they have eye shine? And they said there's nothing in the record to substantiate that that ever happened. I put on a monkey suit, my eyes are still human. They don't glow. The Sasquatch, the light hits its eyes, they glow like a coyote, like a bear. A few years ago, we always got people claiming to be involved in this film as a hoax. And it's so disappointing that the news media is willing to welcome somebody claiming a hoax without investigation, without question. And this is what happened when Ray Wallace died. Ray Wallace had a construction company down in Bluff Creek many years ago, and then by the time the Patterson film was shot, he'd moved his operation back to Washington. But yet, every time footprints show up, they wanted to blame, oh, Ray had a pair of wooden carvings here. So you got Dan Rather with CBS, you got Fox News, you got MSNBC going on. The mystery of Bigfoot has been solved. It was Ray Wallace, according to the Ray Wallace family. Oh, wow. So let's take a look at that. They didn't. So what I did is I got Ray Wallace's carving, and I took, despite the fact that many of these were different lengths than the carving, different widths than the carving, I made them all the same length, I made them all the same width, and I can tell you, a 5-year-old, a beginner, if you'd have just made the comparison, you could see that this wood carving in its toe line could not have made that. But yet, these news channels, Ray never tried to fool anybody, yet skeptics, when you see the tracks along the road, they left this flat appearance, flat, flat, flat. Well, where's the recesses? This is in fine dust and dirt. It left flat tracks. Where Green and everybody stepped with their logging boots, their regular shoes, their tennis shoes, you can see the imprint of every sole pattern. This here would have left like a sponge print in that fine dirt. It would not have left a flat, which a pad does when you step all that weight down on it. It would not have been flat. And all of a sudden now they got to think, oh gosh, we were so certain that Ray Wallace made these. The transfer of evidence from this pattern on the bottom of this foot, which they call a stomper, could not have made this track. A biomechanical foot, and there's anthropology studies in scientific journals that talk about this. When the foot is in motion, it flexes. There are things that take place, and these toes, for instance, when you go to bend your foot, a Sasquatch has what we call a mid-tarsal break. Back here, and right in front of it is actually where it bends its foot. You can see it in the film, you see it in the footprints. The ball of the foot was deeper, and of course the toes are always deeper because by then all of the weight of the animal has come forward. This part's lifted off the ground, and you got everything, and your toes work like hydraulics. You got muscles and tendons pressing down, and now you've got 800,000 pounds instead of being scattered over the whole foot. You got it on the front of the foot, then you got it on the toes last, and they sink in the deepest of the whole track. Here's a picture of 2005 where me and the watchman at 20 Mile Bay made it up to the top of a mountain that had a growed over switchback on it. And I walked over, and this track was there. Again, the big heel, didn't even press here, the ball, and the bulbous toes. It even reached a certain depth of dampness because this had water in it, and the air dries it out, but farther down you deep, you get into the moisture. This is my footprint. After I'd filmed it, I'm a pretty big guy, I took my foot for scale and put it right alongside of it. I have pointed heels, people do. Our heels are much narrower than the big rounded heel of a Sasquatch. Many years later, I'm talking to John Green, and he allows me to see some of his pictures from Blue Creek Mountain taken in the summer of 1967. This is the tracks, the 15 and 13-inch track where they crossed each other's paths at one point, and by golly, the heel stepped The foot cupped, looked like it rolled over onto the ball, and the toes imprinted into the ground right here. And that is exactly what happened in 2005, because I was always bothered why it didn't press the middle. I've seen the mid-tarsal breaks, like you see in the Patterson film, where the foot bends and the large part of the ball of the foot back towards the heel pushes this dirt back, and you get this mound, this ridge across the track back by the heel. So that's another sign of a real working. And these are the beginning, these are the Chrome images, they call them. They're the best images of the film itself. Here you can see the toes on the bottom of the animal. It's in motion. This foot's a little blurred. And here's at the end of the stride, this is one of the things I always point out to people. Notice how the foot is vertical to the ground. Look down here, the foot is hardly off the ground, it's already vertical to the ground. When people walk, and I explain this to folks that come out, even the skeptics, I tell them, listen, when people walk, their feet barely come 15 degrees off the ground. It's like a pendulum. They don't lift their feet vertical, high and vertical. I said, if you want to try doing it, it's hard enough to stand that way. But if you try walking that way, and as far as I know, no one has ever been able to duplicate that. Our bone structure just does not allow it. Here's a track, and I showed you the one up on the mountain in Miles I found. Here's a track that ended up in Ruby Creek. The same year, Archibald happened in late September. A guy by the name of Mark Corton, and Mark was in Ruby Creek hunting by himself, and as he got down by the bog area where a lot of the game is, geese and ducks are down that way, a lot of water. It says he got near one of the bogs, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye, and he turned, and coming down at an angle, a large stone hit the bog right near where he was at. It splashed him through the wall of shrubbery along there. The water was such a splash that it got him wet. He thought he walked up on a hunter's location. He stepped forward and he looked through, apologized or whatever he had on his mind. He looked through, and all he saw was an upright figure walking away through the bush, but he could only see the outline of something dark. He didn't think it was really tall, like it was only maybe 6 feet tall, 6.5 feet tall. Mark's 6'4". But he became unnerved, so he got the heck out of there. He wanted to go out there and see what the heck threw this rock at him. The rock was about 18 inches long and about half as, it was as tall as half of the length of the rock. And one of the things he told me during the conversation was that the way it was spiraling, I thought that's kind of, I said, spiraling? You mean like throwing a football? Yeah, spiraling like that. It was rotating fast. So quickly I asked him before he could even think, I said, which way was it spinning? Without hesitation, he says, towards me, forward. I said, that's a good answer. He says, why? What difference does that make? Primates can throw underhand. They can't throw overhand. And when you flip something underhand, you start the rotation going forward. A ball or anything, it's rolling forward. I picked up a rock half the size of what he described. I tried throwing across this narrow logging road. It never got over my head, and I barely got it 7 feet. This thing threw a rock from 40 feet across a bog, and when he turned, he says, just about a foot or two down through those branches, I saw it coming down at a steep angle. So whatever threw it had lobbed it high and threw it towards it, very strong. I said, sure be nice to get that rock. Corton and his friend never found any tracks. He said, I know the way it went because I could see the bushes move and hear stick snapping, but I could never see it. It went around the other side, and I know the travel it went around the other side and on out of sight down the side of the hillside. So he goes that way, and they didn't find anything. But when Thomas went in, it wasn't 5 minutes. He says, Bill, bring the camera equipment. So I did. This track here, right here, you can see it through the vegetation where it pressed down. And I don't know if you can see it good enough, but this thing, it actually turned the tips of the toes down when it got into the soft bog, almost as if it's gripping. And that's what it's supposed to do. Remember the foot on Mount Archibald when it was going up the hill? It seemed to be gripping the ground and kept going in the direction of travel. This has 5 toe punctures. They had water standing in them. We waited a day or so to let the water seep out of here because it had been raining the day Mark was there and the day after when I interviewed him. And we let it seep out, and Steenberg actually cast this track, believe it or not. And he has a casting of it at his place. And Mark never knew those tracks was there. And I thought, wow, if this guy wanted to hoax me, he would have made sure that I knew that they found those tracks. Come and see them. He never knew. I sent him the pictures. He was so happy that he was able to find evidence to back up his story. Now, if you want to know the classics, I mentioned the Jacko capture up at Yale. That was very interesting. Thomas Steenberg and myself a few years ago were the first researchers in 125 years that actually found that location by the number 4 tunnel. Everything was like it was in the Daily Colonist article. A train was coming from Lytton, and in those days, a gravel road from Agassiz out to Ruby Creek stopped, and it was all forest, all the way up to Hope, all the way up to Yale. There was no road at that time. So this train was coming from Lytton. It rounded the bend. It says, when the number 4 tunnel first came into sight, we saw something laying by the tracks up ahead. We thought it was someone laying there. It blew its whistle. It didn't move. So they had to eventually stop the train. They dismounted, they went towards it, and when they got up to it, it had come to and it scrambled up the rock bluff. It got up so high, about 10 feet or so, because there are 2 rock ledges possible where they said it happened, that it could have gotten to, and they're about 10 feet high. We didn't know which one, they didn't say in the article, but it got hung up. So they called for the bell rope. They didn't know what this strange creature was. It was covered with hair. They never seen anything like it. The term Sasquatch hadn't been coined until the 1920s, I believe, over here at Chehalis by J.W. Burns. So they got the bell rope, they captured it. They telegraphed into town telling them, hey, the train has stopped. You have to tell them why. In those days, a lot of robbery stuff going on. Not to worry, we're a little bit behind. They're bringing this creature in that we captured. So they took it into town. The whole town had heard about this news. It was in a stir. They stopped short of town and dropped it off at the machine shop. They had a doctor named Hannington examine it. In his report, he says that it was 4 feet 7 inches tall, 127 pounds, covered with short black hair all over its body. It had hands and feet, it said paws in parentheses, like a human's, like a man's, but all the fingers ran in the same direction, no opposing thumb like we had. The feet had 5 toes like we have. And it had a short, black, strong hair, it said. And one of the interesting things that the doctor mentioned, from the elbow to the wrist was longer than a man's arm. And they found that it could break a stick by twisting it rather than snapping it like we would have to do. Very strong. What he described was a ape. And I don't think the first gorillas weren't brought over to this continent until around 1902, 1906. So that 25 years earlier, they wouldn't even actually seen gorillas. They would have seen monkeys probably, but not gorillas. Because what you're describing is the size of a chimp or a small gorilla. Those are expensive exotic animals. I said, no one dumps them on logging roads like an old dog you don't want anymore. I said, a Sasquatch is not born big. It comes out as a youngster and it has to grow. They think it got too close to the rock bluff and had fallen and it was just knocked out and knocked the wind out or something. That's how they wound up seeing it by the tracks. They go to take it to England, and somewhere along the line, there's no real trail on it. It ran out. They don't know what exactly happened to it. But in those days, I can only speculate whether you be at sea or on a train. If something dies, you don't leave it laying there, especially if you got a long trip ahead, because they worried about plague and getting sick from a dead body. No way to preserve it. So they probably pitched it overboard, not knowing what it was. And that was unfortunate because there was that one opportunity that they could have had the body, and they didn't, and they discarded it.